Hey, how's it going everybody? In this video, I'm going to be showing you a creature only deck. It's going to cost around 55 bucks, however it's obviously easily customizable and upgradable. All you got to do is throw in your favorite creatures. We are going to be using a red-green commander, Nikia. It's going to prevent us from casting non-creature spells. However, whenever we tap land for mana, we're going to add 1 mana of any type that land could produce to our mana pool. This essentially makes it so our lands could produce 2 times the amount of mana because we're casting only creature spells. The idea of this deck is quite simple. We're going to play a lot of ramp, then we're going to use that mana to cast pretty big and powerful creatures. Since we're not running any instances or anything, we're going to have to rely on our creatures to do all the work, so we need to play certain creatures that have removal and other types of utility. We'll start off with some of the big creatures. Rurik can also be played as a commander. It's a 6-mana 6/6 with vigilance and reach, and it makes it so whenever a player casts a non-creature spell, it's going to deal 6 damage to that player. This obviously won't affect us because we're only running creatures. Omnath is a little pricey for a budget deck, but the card's insane. It has a landfall, so whenever land enters the battlefield under control, we're going to create a 5/5 creature token, and whenever this card or another elemental dies, we're going to deal 3 damage to any target. So this can potentially generate a token or 2 every single turn, and also ping targets as removal. Infernal Titan's a big body on the board that can grow even larger, and whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, we're going to deal up to 3 damage to up to 3 different targets. Terrestrodon's a pretty big elephant. It's also a big body on the board, and it allows us to target up to 3 non-creature permanents and destroy them, and they get replaced with 3/3 tokens. We can target our opponent's lands or anything else to potentially destroy them. The big ape is also a huge body, and when it enters the battlefield, we can fight another target creature, and whenever it attacks, we destroy an artifact or enchantment. This card's definitely needed in the deck because it acts as removal for enchantments and artifacts, as well as other creatures. Ravager Worm is pretty good too because we can give it haste or a counter, and when it enters the battlefield we can fight a target creature, or we can destroy a land with an activated ability. Archetype of Endurance is going to give all of our creatures hexproof, and makes it so our opponent's creatures lose hexproof and they can't gain hexproof. The Mammoth is 6 mana and is an 8/8 with trample and gives every other creature we have trample. And Sun's Avatar is going to make it so whenever another creature enters the battlefield under our control, we're going to gain life equal to its toughness. These 2 cards can be casted earlier or later in the game depending on how much mana we have. Mistcutter Hydra is nice because it can't be countered and has protection from blue. It also has the benefit of having haste. Savage-Born Hydra is a sweet card. It has double strike, it enters the battlefield with counters, and we can even give it extra counters. This deck has the potential to put a lot of lands on our battlefield, so cards like Rubble Hulk are going to be pretty good. Its power and toughness are equal to the number of lands we have, and for only 3 mana we can target an attacking creature we have, and it's going to get +X/+X to the end of turn where X is the number of lands we have. Primal Storm's a pretty fun card too because whenever it attacks we're going to exile the top card of each player's library, and then we can cast those cards without paying their mana costs. Also, this card, Rubble Hulk, and the previous card, Savage-Born Hydra, are all Raymond Swallen arts. He's definitely my favorite artist. Mangorger Hydra is pretty cool because whenever a player casts a spell, we're going to put a counter on this card. Whenever the creature we control enters the battlefield or dies, if the power was greater than Pelt Collector's power, we're going to put a counter on this card. The main point of this deck is to accelerate our mana base and to cast larger creatures. However, sometimes playing these 1 mana cards earlier in the game is pretty good, to at least pose a threat. Scoop Mob is pretty dumb because at the beginning of each of our upkeeps, if we control 5 or more lands, we're going to put 4 counters on this card. And again, this is going to activate every upkeep as long as we have 5 or more lands. So this card can get pretty massive for only being 1 mana. Kind of similar to the previous cards, these cards are just some more threats that could be pretty good early on in the game. Gruul Spellbreaker is a 3-mana 3/3 that can have haste or be a 4/4. It also does have hexproof as long as it's our turn. Whenever Tectonic Giant attacks or becomes a target of a spell, we can deal 3 damage to each opponent, and we can also potentially draw some more cards in a sense. Whenever Hornet's Nest is dealt damage, we're going to create 1/1 insect tokens with Death Touch. Again, this could act as removal if our opponents try to attack into us. Just trying to get creative with what we can use. Runic Armasaur is a little expensive at $3, but this card's definitely needed. Whenever an opponent activates an ability of a creature or land and it isn't a mana ability, we get to draw a card. In a commander game, this is going to happen a lot. At the beginning of our end step, if we control a creature power 5 or greater, we can draw a card if we have Drum Hunter on the battlefield. We can also tap it to add 1 generic mana to our mana pool. These next 3 cards are going to allow us to draw some extra cards. Whenever we cast a creature spell, Beast Whisperer is going to let us draw a card. A little expensive again, but this card is so good. Definitely need it. Soul of Harvest is going to make it so whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under control, we can then draw a card. And if a creature enters the battlefield with 3 or greater under our control, we get to draw a card if Garruk's Pack Leader is on the field. We can tap on Walden Tracker each turn to fight another target creature and act as removal. When Acidic Slime enters the battlefield, we can destroy a target artifact, enchantment, or land. It also has Death Touch, so we can destroy other creatures when they attack. And when Meteor Golem enters the battlefield, we can destroy any target non-permanent an opponent controls. Both Reclamation Sage and Manglehorn can allow us to deal with artifacts our opponent has. Eternal Witness and Genesis can get things back from our graveyard. Genesis is really good because at the beginning of each of our upkeeps, we can pay 3 mana, we can return target creature from our graveyard back to our hand. It's good because it's a 4/4 body on the field, but also this can be activated every single upkeep. And you can also activate this multiple times. Scavenging Ooze Roots can help us exile cards from graveyards as well as gain some life and grow this card. The Behemoth is going to allow us to play lands from our graveyard. And if Brawn is in our graveyard and we have a forest, it's going to give all of our creatures trample. Both Urabrask and Rebelford are going to give our creatures haste. Urabrask is also going to make it so all of our creatures our opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. Both of these cards can't be countered, and it's going to make it so creature spells that we have can't be countered. The Behemoth is a little more limiting, and the creature has to be 5 or greater, but it's still quite similar. Champion of Aronas can be exerted, and if we do, we get to put a creature card from our hand on the battlefield. Kind of a nice cheeky way to cheat out some larger creatures. The Crucifix is going to help us gain some life whenever land enters the battlefield, and we can also play with the top card of our library revealed, and we get to play if it's a land, so it almost gives us like an extra card in our hand in a sense. When the Brutalizer enters the battlefield, we're going to search the library for a creature card, and we get to put it on top of our deck, or we get to put target non-creature permanent on the bottom of its owner's library, so it's kind of versatile. Moving on to some ramp cards, we're playing all the cheap elves. We're also playing Arbor Elf as well as these other 2 cards going to help us get other lands on the battlefield. Burnished Heart and the Solemn Dude are going to allow us to search for land cards. These cards are pretty standard in other decks as well. We can add 2 extra mana to our mana pool as long as we're casting creature spells with Gwenna. And whenever we cast a creature spell 5 or greater, we're going to put counters on her. Both the Sage and the Land War Tribe are going to allow us to generate 3 extra mana to our mana pool. When Veteran Explorer dies, each player can search their library for 2 basic land cards and put them on the battlefield. This does help our opponent, but at the same time, it's more beneficial for us because of the larger creatures that we're playing that are more impactful. The next 2 elves are kind of similar. They're able to search for other lands and add them to the battlefield. When we play the Grazer, we're able to put another land on the battlefield, and Wall of Roots can also generate us some more green mana. The Goblin is going to make it so red and green spells cost 1 generic less to cast. Goreclaw is almost $5, but check out this card. Creature spells we cast with 4 or greater cost 2 generic less to cast. And whenever this card attacks, each creature with power 4 or greater gets an extra +1/+1 and gains trample. I think above $5 might be pushing the price of this card, but anything below I think it's pretty good consideration. Moving on to some lands, Lair of Hydra is basically a Hydra card. You can pay X and 1 green and it becomes an XX green Hydra to the end of turn. You can pay 6 mana, tap and sacrifice the Slumber Mound to destroy a target land, and you get to create a 4/4 token with trample. You can pay 4 generic mana for Crawling Barrens. You get to put 2 +1 counters on this card. Then you can have it become a 0/0 elemental creature. What's great about this is it's not once per turn. If you have a lot of mana, you can continually put counters on this card, and you don't have to make it become a creature, which is the even better part. So you can even activate this at instant speed during your opponent's turn or during their end phase, so none of your mana is wasted. We can give a creature +X and trample to the end of turn with Kessig Wolfrun. Rogue's Passage can make your creature unblockable. And we can pay some mana and sacrifice Memorial Unity to look at the top 5 cards of the library. And we can reveal a creature and put it into our hand. These 3 lands are all quite generic and run in most commander decks. And Cinderglade and Gruul Turf are just good ways of getting dual color lands. Oran Reef is a good way just to get some extra counters on creatures. And we're playing 9 mountains and 18 forests. We really need to hit our green mana. As long as we do that, we can get other mountains by searching. Some 2 quick upgrades I would highly consider are Bane of Progress and Anger. Bane of Progress can destroy all artifacts and enchantments. You get to put +1/+1 counters for each permanent destroyed this way. You really need this type of removal in Commander, and this card is one of the best cards out there for it. I really want to add Anger to the deck, but this card's getting insanely expensive. As long as this card's in our graveyard and we have a mountain on the battlefield, we're going to give all of our creatures haste. Kind of similar to Brawn, but I think Anger is a little bit better. Definitely let me know down below what cards I should add to the deck, or some of your favorite Gruul creatures that you can add to this deck. If you're looking to play Magic the Gathering but don't want to spend too much money, definitely check out the channel. We post a lot of deck techs and bring up conversations about how to play this game and still have fun without really breaking the bank. Take care everybody, hope to see you in another video.